Dead on Your Feet. Arthur Grant Michaels, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1993. Stan Kraychik Mystery, Book 3. Narrator Eric Aust. In memory of Tajana and Andre, with gratitude and respect and love, thanks to the patience and generosity of my friends. Chapter 18. The Next to the Last Tango. It was just after 5:30 when I let myself into Max Harkey's flat at the Appleton. Fortunately, the locks had not been changed yet. The darkness inside the flat and the still air and the lack of any sound was mildly disturbing, the way a museum can be after hours. I found some platters in the kitchen and set out the food. It was then that I got the final inspiration of how best to spend the short time I'd be with these people. I went searching through the sprawling flat for a particular item, something I was certain Max Harkey had owned because of my familiarity with Rafik's work as a choreographer. I found it in what appeared to be Max Harkey's study. It was an artist's easel with a large sketch pad on it. Rafik often used one just like it for roughing out costume designs and preliminary stage blocking. Since Max Harkey had been his mentor, I assumed that Rafik had adopted the technique from him. I set the easel up in the living room and awaited my guests. Eliza, Tony, and Scott arrived together shortly after 6 o'clock. They'd obviously walked to Les Trois from the studios, and they brought a noisy, festive energy with them. I cautioned them to remain quiet since we were all technically trespassing. They were blithely unaffected by my warning, and instead the group of three headed straight for the food. "You invited us," said Tony Di Natale, chomping on a slice of roulade. "Now, don't go making all kinds of rules. Let's have some fun before rehearsal tonight." Theater people, perhaps they knew better how to shrug off the petty concerns of life. "There's one more guest," I said, "but I have a feeling she won't be here." "Let's get started," said Scott, who had piled his plate full of food. Elisa added, "We only have an hour." She'd put less food on the plate she was holding, but then I saw that she'd divided her meal between two plates. So much for the ideal of leftovers. "Yes," said Tony, "only an hour. Rehearsal starts at 7. It was so nice of you to have this reception for us." "But," I began. "And so clever to have it here," she went on. "No one can bother us because no one knows where we are. Perhaps we can finally toast Max with the kind of impromptu party he could never enjoy or even imagine. Here's to you, Max," she said. She raised a bottle of Italian mineral water in the air. "Read us his diary while we're eating," said Elisa. "Spill it all for us," said Scott, who was clearly enjoying his food and his lip double entendre. Meanwhile, I was flabbergasted by their energy. Here I'd been planning to get to the root of things, to delve seriously into the events of the night Max Harkey was killed, to find the missing pieces to identify his killer, and instead, I'd created a boisterous party. I stood up to make a formal announcement. "I owe you all an apology. I don't have the diary." But my statement caused peals of laughter among them. These folks were making a debacle of my investigation. Perhaps the pressures of rehearsal and the imminent opening night performance had made them paunchy. Their defenses had been tried to the point where they could no longer control their behavior. The question was, how far did that lack of control extend? "Lighten up," said Tony. "Max was too serious, and look where it got him. He didn't even get to see the new season open." I said, "Max Harkey's serious nature was hardly the cause of his death." "We all know it was a knife," said Elisa. "But who was holding the knife?" I said. "Was it one of you?" The room went instantly quiet. "Please," said Scott, "if you don't have the diary, then let's just eat and go back to work." "Sure," I said, "and let Max's killer go free." Elisa said, "He's dead. It's done. The estate is settled. What good is finding the killer? It's not going to bring Max back." I moved toward the easel. It was time for the game. "I happen to know that all three of you sought Max's affections at one time, and now it's obvious that you've all lost the contest to Marielle Rabinskaya. Ergo, I assume that you resented Max for withdrawing from the sexual arena so abruptly, and for settling down so easily. After only one sexual encounter with Marielle, Max Harkey was forever unavailable to any of you. This sounds like a soap opera, said Elisa. If the shoe fits, muttered Scott. Elisa glared at him. I continued. I'm assuming that nobody in this room killed Max Harkey, Tony said. Thanks for that, at least. I'm also assuming that you, I should include myself, we have all lied about some of the things we've said so far to protect our egos or our reputations. Like now, said Scott. Shut up, said Elisa. Continue, Professor, said Tony. I did. And despite those lies, some little bits of truth always manage to slip out. And sometimes those fragments stick to other bits of truth to create a bigger piece of truth. That's when we enter the realm of danger. The payoff comes when enough of the stuff sticks together to convict the killer. Scott remarked, So what are you saying? Is this going to be some kind of encounter group? No, I said. I was thinking of something lighter, like a parlor game. We could call it My Last Time with Max. Tony laughed heartily. At least someone appreciated my kind of levity. I went on. The only rule of the game is you don't have to tell the truth, as long as you know the truth. What good is that? Asked Elisa. You'll see, I said. On the easel, I drew a large grid. Across the top, I filled in times in half-hour increments, and down the side, I listed the names of the 3 people present. On this grid, I'm going to map everybody's actions the night of the party for every hour. Each square of the grid will contain part of someone's version of what happened that night. Scott demanded, Where's your name? I hardly knew Max. But Rafik did, said Tony. Yeah, added Scott. Maybe you killed Max because you were jealous of his professional relationship with Rafik. That's ridiculous, I countered. Fair is fair, said Elisa. But I brought the food, I protested weakly. Scott snapped his fingers and pointed to the easel. Names, he said, just like a man. Yours and Rafik's. So I added my name to the grid and then Rafik's under it. As I did so, I felt a calmness spreading within me. Had I passed some milestone of emotional growth? Was I about to testify before them all to share my version of the stormy saga of Stan and Rafik? Recovery be damned. No way. What about Madame? Said Elisa. I added Madame Levinskaya's name to the grid. And Marshal Xander, said Scott. Good, I thought. We finally got the 2 real suspects. Anyone else? I said in my best impersonation of a facilitator. No one answered. I said, What about Jason Sears? Tony quickly interjected. He barely knew Max. And besides, he didn't stay for the party. Put his name down anyway, said Scott. Nobody gets away this time. As I scrunched Jason's name onto the bottom of the chart, I thought, they're hungry to implicate anyone else to divert suspicion from themselves. I turned to face them and Scott said, Now that we're ready to play police station, you go first. Sure, I said, figuring I'd gain their confidence if I was agreeable. I started filling in the grid with my own version of the night. Max Harkey was murdered. I annotated my entries with a running commentary to liven up the drama of the otherwise dreary night I'd spent alone. 10:30, stumble out of Max's place, see Big Red parked on the sidewalk. At 11, arrive home and cry myself to sleep. 12, awake, sob melodramatically. 1, ditto, throughout night. 6:30, phone call from Rafik. 7, arrive back at Max's. As you can see, I said, until I got the telephone call from Rafik, I spent the night rather uneventfully. Pitifully, I'd say, muttered Scott. Unfazed, I went on. So, since my night was so dull, I'd like to speculate on what some of the other people were doing. I proceeded to fill in some of the empty boxes on the grid, specifically 11:30. Max home alone. 12, Madame walks dog. 3, Scott cruises Esplanade. Hey, said Scott, what are you doing? Those aren't your boxes. But it's my game. Scott said, I'll tell you what I did myself. Be my guest, I said. So his story began. I left Max's place with Elisa around 11. I walked her home then. He looked at Elisa. Her eyes held a tiny warning, which Scott chose not to heed. He continued, I asked her if I could come up. Nice alibi, I said, except she told me I was being silly. Through clenched teeth, Elisa muttered, "You bastard!" "And then what?" I asked. "And then," he said, "and then—" "Well," said Tony. "Tell them," said Elisa. "Now that you've ruined both our alibis, you might as well finally say it." Scott said, "I went back to Max's flat." Almost predictably, I thought. "When was that?" I asked. "I don't know. I walked around for a long time. After Elisa's humiliated me, I had to build up the courage to do it, to go to Max. It was a big step for me, like my last chance for his love. I'd been trying and trying with women, but it didn't work. It was Max I really wanted." "So you went back to his place?" "Yes." "And told him how you felt?" "No." "No?" "No." "Then what did happen?" "I rang his apartment, but he didn't answer. Then I saw the front door was broken, so I went up to his place. The door was open." Scott's chin began quivering uncontrollably. "Max was at the piano. The blood was all over him. I knew he was—" He stopped, and I pressed him to go on. "What time was it?" I said. "I don't know." "Was the sun coming up?" "I don't know," he yelled. Then he broke down into violent sobs. I made a move to comfort him, but he pushed me away. Likewise, he resisted Tony's attempt to hold and quiet him. Meanwhile, Elisa sat and watched with a cool, satisfied stare. She seemed to be enjoying Scott's pain and defeat, as though she had a vested interest in keeping him that way and subservient to her. Tony grimaced at me. "Well done," she said. I sighed. "My parties always turn out like this." Then Elisa spoke up sharply. "Well, I went back too, and I can assure you that Max was not dead when I got there." "What time?" I said quickly, leaping toward the easel. "It was—" Lisa fumbled. "I don't know, damn you. Do you think people look at their watches all the time?" "Just go on," encouraged Tony after glaring at me. The young ballerina said, "I wanted Max to reconsider his decision to cancel the Phoenix." "Cancel?" I said. "But he just cast you in the part that night." Tony added quickly, "After you left the party, Max told us that he had changed his mind and was going to cancel the Phoenix for the entire season." "Really?" I said. Both women nodded. "So," continued Elisa, "in the same night I had won and lost the major coup of my dancing career. When Max had cast me in the role against Madame's wishes, I felt a great victory. It put me above her in importance, which is as it should be with dancers, but then Max changed his mind and said no. So I went back later and tried to reason with him. That's when he told me he had reconsidered his decision to cast me against Madame's wishes, and that's why he decided to cancel the Phoenix altogether. When I told him I couldn't accept that, he laughed and said that I had nothing to say about it. In fact, he told me that he and I were finished as well. That's what we really fought about. He said we'd had our fling with each other and got what we wanted and that it was over. But I wasn't going to let him off that easy. I started hitting him hard. He grabbed me and tried to overpower me. I felt he was going to transform our fight into a sexual contest. He always did that, and I was fed up with it, so when he began thrusting his hips against mine, I pulled back just far enough to knee him in the groin. Then I kicked him hard, a full-force batement to his jaw, and sent him sprawling back into that big bronze statue. He hit his head and was dazed. When I went to help him, he screamed at me, called me a... Never mind. Then he passed out. He was breathing regularly, so I assumed he'd be all right. I left quickly. That's the last time I saw him alive. I didn't believe that I'd killed him then. Later, when I learned that he'd been murdered, I assumed I was the killer. I didn't plan to kill him, although he'd made me so angry that I never regretted hurting him. Like the village idiot, I stood at the easel with the marking pen in my hand. Tony's jaw was in her lap, and Scott was crying quietly. Elisa's story was absurd. "Did you tell the police all this?" I asked her. "Of course not. I wasn't going to admit that I was the last person to see Max alive." "If your story has any truth in it, you weren't," I said. "Someone dragged him to the piano and stabbed him there. The blood was localized around the piano." Scott had recovered enough from his crying to say, "It wasn't me. Max was already dead when I got there." "But between Elisa's visit and yours, someone went into Max's apartment, dragged him unconscious to the piano, and cut the arteries to his thighs." Tony caught my gaze on her and said, "Don't look at me like that. I was with Rafik all night. We took a long walk after leaving Max's place, talking about work and love. When we got to my hotel, Jason wouldn't let me in the room." "It's all right, Tony," I said. "You don't have to explain. But I want to. I want to set the story straight. With you, once and for all. Jason's jealousy that night alarmed Rafik, even though I tried to assure him it happened all the time. It was one more thing that Rafik and I had in common, our jealous lovers. But I was prepared to take another room in the hotel that night, but they were full up. Rafik offered me his place, saying that he would stay with you that night. But I didn't want him to disturb you. From what I could see, you needed time away from each other to cool down. So I stayed with him in his place, and he insisted I take the bed while he took the floor. So for your information, Rafik is still all yours." She finished her spiel with a righteous grin. "I know," I said. "I know. I was utterly beyond jealousy now. But what I don't know is which one of the two remaining people delivered the coup de grace to Max Harkey." "Wouldn't it be wise to leave it to the police?" Tony said. Then she checked her watch. "It's almost time for rehearsal." The three of them got up to leave, and I followed them to the door. Scott and Elisa were glum and left without a word. Tony said to me, "This ought to be some show tonight, thanks to you." They left me, and I closed up Max Harkey's apartment. Before going down one floor to confront Madame Rabenskaya, I considered calling Lieutenant Branco. But then I figured I'd be safe enough facing the old woman alone. If she had managed to kill Max Harkey, it was only because he'd been conscious at the time, while from all indications I seemed to be awake. When I pressed the buzzer, Madame's dog, Valushka, began squealing behind the door and scratching at it. Moments later, I heard the old woman murmur to the animal and try to pacify it. Then she spoke sharply through the door. "Who is there?" "Stan Kraychik." "Who?" "The friend of Rafik." Through the big door came the various metallic sounds of locks and bars being disengaged on the other side. Then it slipped open a few inches, and Valushka's black muzzle appeared and sniffed the air nervously. Higher up, I caught the quick glint of Madame Rabenskaya's eyes before she released the final chain and opened the door for me. A heavy, sickly sweet odor emanated from our foyer, and I unfairly assumed it was Valushka. "The God you come," said Madame. "I have so much now to tell you." "A confession already?" I entered the foyer. Madame closed the big door and methodically refastened all the locks and chains. I said, "Why didn't you come to Max Harkey's place?" "I could not go back there." "Why? Because of what you did to him?" "You don't know what happened here tonight." "I want to know what happened the night Max Harkey was killed." Madame Rabenskaya heaved a weary sigh. "You are like the police," she said. "First I get us something to eat." And she shuffled toward her kitchen. "You are hungry," she said. The question must have registered with Valushka, for she wagged her tail energetically and trotted after Madame. "No," I replied, and followed them both. "You are sure?" I stood in the doorway to her kitchen. "Madame Rabenskaya, how can I think of food when I suspect that you might have killed Max Harkey and Rico?" "What? What you are saying? That I am killer? Me?" "You can save the histrionics. I see through you." "And what you see," she said. "You see old woman, you see bitter woman, you see tired woman, but do you see killer? Why would I kill that boy?" "Because he knew that after you killed Max, you took the diary and the musical score." My accusations caused Madame Rabenskaya to grab onto the edge of the kitchen counter to steady herself. "Bush!" she said. "You are like dancer who tries and tries until she does it right. You don't care what else is happening. Only your idea. Only your world. Nothing else." She pulled herself up straight, then filled two full, tall glasses with hot tea. She put them on a tray with some pastries and walked past me toward her sitting room. "Come," she said. "Now you will have good reward. You will be happy now because you will know the truth." She put the tray on the coffee table, then sat on her big cushioned chair. Marushka settled at her feet, and I sat facing her from the sofa. The stage was set for her big scene, and she began. She said, "You know what it means, icon." I nodded, and then gestured to the Byzantine image of Christ, mounted high in one ceiling corner of the room. Yes, said Madame. That is icon, but also was my grandmother, icon in all Russia. She was symbol for romantic ballet. She was like Sate. She was Rabinskaya. Madame put several spoonfuls of sugar into her tea and stirred it. Take tea, she said. I took the other glass, now weary of being captive. Not to a killer, but to a lonely old woman living vicariously through her ancestors. Much like our domestic aristocrats from the antebellum South, the people who wrapped gifts at Neiman Marcus but managed to apprise you of the glory days when their daddy's folks owned vast plantations of sugar and cotton. Madame Rabinskaya continued her litany. For my grandmother was created the role of the phoenix when she was young ballerina, and she dances it for her whole career. In Russia, the phoenix was more famous than Pavlova's dying swan. Did you know that? No, I said. It's true. And she was smart in business, too. She made, how do you say, copy and write. Copyright. Madame Rabinskaya nodded and smiled. Copyright. My grandmother made copyright on that ballet, so no one could dance without her permission. A precedent for a dancer in Imperial Russia, I thought. And she leaves to my mother, and my mother leaves to me that copyright. So now only I can give the permission to dance the phoenix. You understand? Yes, I said. So your mother was a dancer? No. She had no music in her blood, and such bad feet, no arch. My brother and I have good bodies for dancer, and I become ballerina, but my brother's daughter, that is Morel's mother, she is just like our mother. No music in her blood, but still she keeps the name Rabinskaya. I heard the notion among dancers that natural talent often skipped a generation. Madame Rabinskaya's lineage seemed to confirm the myth. You have no children yourself, I asked. I never marry. Yet you are called Madame. It is title of respect for old women. She repeated the word as if savoring its irony. Respect, she said with a snigger. That is why I took the music from Max's piano. It is mine. I have the right to take it. The phoenix is sacred. It was not performed for 2 generations. So when it comes back on stage, it must be with Russian ballerina. But Maxie was saying that American girl can dance the phoenix. That was not right. He has no respect for that role. It was for Morel. Only Morel. No other girl. Is that why you killed him? He was destroying Morel's career. He makes love to her, and then he deserts her. But he didn't, I said. Max was going to... I know what happens in London, she said. I have a strong connection to my great niece. She would never fall. Never. But Maxie comes back from London, and I know what happens over there. He breaks her heart. I know how he is with girls, but I never thought he would do that to Morel. But Morel isn't broken-hearted, I said. She says she loves Maxie, but in her heart she knows he ruins her career and her life. She falls on her knees, and she will never dance again. But it will heal, Madame. When the knee is hurt, you never dance the same. Madame, you don't understand. Morel is... No, you don't understand. Now you listen to me. No one ever listens to old people. We are not crazy. We are just tired. We see too much pain. I was a young girl once too. I had dreams, just like you. Maybe more. I had scholarship in St. Petersburg at Imperial Ballet School. I have everything there. Warmth, food, security. I learned new ideas. Ideals of art. Ballet was my survival. Ballet was my life. It comes before my friends, or my family, or even God. She paused to sip at her tea, and I attempted to hasten her story. I had a killer to convict, after all. I said, and you lost everything in the revolution. I escaped with my brother to Europe. My grandmother gave me the music for the Phoenix piano score and full orchestra. I still have them. I become character dancer. You know what is? Yes, I said, recalling that she had already told me that during an earlier visit here. It's very exciting stuff. Madame gave a modest shrug. It's mostly tricks. That's not true. There's a lot of passion in character dancing. The best of it makes your blood boil. But it's not romantic, not like the Phoenix. Did you ever dance that role, I asked. She pondered the question as if she had to recover a lost answer, then she said sadly, I was not good enough. Morel was. Morel was perfect. Her debut would be first time the new Rabenskaya is on stage in America. The Phoenix will make her famous around the world. No wonder she was so angry over Max Harkey's decision. He'd cast Elisa Cortland in the role almost whimsically, while for Madame Rabenskaya, her grandniece's debut was to revitalize a long-dormant line of great artists. When did you meet Max Harkey? I said. I was teaching already in France. 45 I was. I was not dancing anymore. Then she added somewhat proudly, character roles are very strenuous. I know, I said agreeably. Maxie was young dancer from America. He was trying to make his career in Europe. His looks and temperament did not suit American taste at that time. He was too... Something caught in her throat, and she coughed harshly until it cleared. Too much cigarettes, she said. My lungs will be smoked ham. You were saying about Max. Madame Rabenskaya raised her eyebrows. Maxie was too sexual. His face was all beautiful angles, eyes so bright, and his body, even when he died, he was like a god, and it was rare, just like now in ballet, that he likes girls. Really likes. Not pretending like in Russia, where some men must hide their true feelings. She added quite quickly, I hope I don't offend you. Hardly, I said. I freely acknowledge the existence of good-looking, heterosexual men. That was Maxie, she said. When he is parting a girl, he holds her and supports her and caresses her like he is making her ready for him, like he is going to make love. Madame placed her glass of tea on the table and sighed quietly. How long did he study with you? I said. He was already a good dancer. He wanted to be a choreographer. I encouraged him, but his talent is too big for me. He makes many friends with wealthy men, and sometimes their wives too. She smiled playfully. So many times he is almost caught, but he is serious too. He forms a small company and makes a big success. When did he meet Marshal Zander? Madame's brow furrowed. Sometime then, she said. That is when we come to America to make the Boston City Ballet. That was about 20 years ago. Yes, said Madame. Maybe more. But her storytelling fires had been extinguished by my mention of Marshal Zander. I like very much to live in Boston, especially in winter. It reminds me when I was student in St. Petersburg. All those clothes and the snow and the cold and the frost on the window glass. Not the summer? Ah, too hot! So you've been with the company here ever since its beginning? Maxie and me, we do everything. He did choreography, and he has good head for business. But I train the dancers. I give Maxie his material. Like artist has paint or sculptor has clay, Maxie has dancers, and I make them for him. And now the Boston City Ballet has an international reputation for changing the shape of classical dance. Maxie and I never have such ideals. We never try to make progressive ballet, but the whole world was always looking at Maxie for what they should do next. That is what changed him. Now he has reputation, one that comes by surprise from outside. If Maxie stayed on his own ideals, he would be all right. Maybe even still alive, I thought. But instead he follows what the world is saying about him. He believes everybody else and forgets about his art, and that is when he becomes a monster. A monster? What do you mean? I said I wanted to hear more of these suppressed feelings. Please tell me more, Madame. How was Max Harkey a monster? She said, Suddenly Maxie sees I am old woman, he wants to throw me away. He has no more humor, he runs away from me. So I leave him alone. I don't bother him. I do my job. I give good class. But now Maxie thinks he is God. Madame Rabenskaya, what happened that night? You were there. You saw. It was wonderful party. Big success until Maxie makes an announcement about the Phoenix. Even though Morel cannot dance, that was proof he turns against me. I never think he would do that. Give road to young American girl. He deceives me, and in my heart I want to show him how angry I am. But I go home. And then you went out again to the ballet studio. Yes, she said tentatively. What? Something else happened that night. I don't tell anyone. But you want to tell me? Yes, said Madame Levinskaya. I will tell you to prove that I kill no one. Maybe I feel the passion to kill, and maybe I make many mistakes, but I did not kill Maxie. What happened then? She offered me a plate of sweets. Your cookie, she said. Was she trying to distract me, or did she simply need a brief intermission for herself? No, I replied. Please go on. So, she said, after I come home, then later I hear noises from Maxie's apartment upstairs. Part of his big room is over us here. I pressed her. What kind of noises? I hear loud, angry voices, then becomes quiet, then more shouting again. Men's or women's voices? Were they men or women's who were shouting? Madame's eyes narrowed as she tried to recreate the sounds of that evening in her head. I hear Maxie, and then I hear girl. Then I hear crash on floor. Big sound. Like maybe the statue is falling. Even Rushka was nervous then. She was running and barking. Then all is quiet up there. Quiet. Quiet. So you went up to see? Yes, she said. And Max was on the floor, lying against the big sculpture. How you know about that? Said the old woman. Yet her question confirmed at least one part of Elisa Cortland's version of the events that night. Elisa told me she fought with Max. So she killed him! No, madame. They fought because Max had changed his mind later that night. He realized his error in casting Elisa as the Phoenix, so instead he was canceling the piece altogether. This news seemed to strike the old woman like a blow. Maxie changed his mind, she said. Yes. You see, Max had kept his promise to you after all. The Phoenix would not be performed without Morel. And when Elisa left him, Max was still alive. He was only unconscious. Someone else dragged him to the piano and killed him there. I wondered again, could this old woman have done it? It would have been a kind of infanticide, yet all that unexpressed passion between them might have driven her to kill him. But was she that kind of person? Did she possess that ability to kill someone knowingly? Or had it been done in a moment of ultimate and literal carelessness? When a person cares about nothing but the action at hand, even if the act was not premeditated, Madame had been under grave emotional stress, and that had reached its peak that night. Passion might have spurred her on. Finally, she said, I know Maxie was still alive. How I know? I checked his breathing. She sounded as though she was ready at last to tell the truth. So I am making call to the police, and then I see on his piano the score for the Phoenix, and I think that what Maxie wants to do, and I think what that role is for me and for Morel, and then I think I will not help him. I will leave him there. He gets what he deserves. I did not know that he changed his mind. How can I know that? So I take the music and come back here. Then I smoke cigarettes and think what to do next. And that's when you decided to go to the ballet studios. Yes, I want to be away from him. And that's when his killer arrived. Ah, what a mistake I did. Her eyes were filling with tears, and for the first time I believed they might be real. She continued, Maybe I did not kill Maxie with the knife, but now I see that I leave him there for his killer. So I kill him too. I should help him that night, and instead I was cursing his soul. She got up from her chair, and I asked where she was going. I will light candle now, for him. She went to a credenza and opened one of the top drawers, from which she produced a small votive candle. She brought it back and set it down on the coffee table between us, then lit it. Perhaps it is too late, she said, but I pray that Maxie will understand why I did not help him. I thought he was betraying me. I will pray for his soul. There's a part of him that's still alive, I said. You wouldn't let me tell you earlier, but I have other news from Morel in London. She is pregnant, and Max intended to marry her. Madame Levinskaya then let out a long, horrible cry and broke down into violent sobbing. And here I thought I told her some good news. Her crying continued. I began to feel awkward about sitting there. Like I said before, I don't seem to have what it takes to bear up under other people's real pain and sorrow. Finally, Madame stopped crying. Then she picked up her head and blew out the candle. She gave a small shiver. I said. Since you didn't know about Max MRL, I guess you don't have Max's diary either. I thought you did. Marshals say that too, that I have diary. When? I told you he was here tonight. No, you didn't, madame. He comes to tell me about his love for Maxie, like he is making confession to his mother. Then he tells me that he loves Maxie so much, but Maxie always likes girls, so he gets mad at him. Marshall tells me this. He is like a broken-hearted girl. And then he says he will go to the police and tell them everything. He's going to confess? Madame shrugged weakly. I have no more strength to think. I am too tired. Madame, I think you might be in shock. I'm going to call for help. No, she said. I will be all right. But I'm concerned you might... She looked at me quizzically. You are thinking I will hurt myself. I am not a coward. Perhaps I make many mistakes, but I will face them. I never run away. That was a relief. One thing this case didn't need was a dramatic suicide attached to it. Some meticulously executed act of self-retribution. Madame Ekaterina Ravenskaya's last show. I'm going to leave you now. Just lock the door and don't let anyone in. Promise? She nodded quietly, then followed me to the door. When I'd left her, I heard all the mechanical sounds of security as Madame resealed the door to her apartment. While I was waiting for the elevator, I checked my watch. It was just after 8 o'clock. Rafik would be rehearsing. Branco was probably dining with Nicole. I decided to go to Station D anyway. I'd report everything I just found out to one of Branco's assistants. Then I'd go home and have a quiet night with Sugar Baby. Just as the elevator arrived, I heard a voice behind me. I missed your soiree at Max's place. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.